Hello, everyone. My name is Farhad, and I'm Systematic Reviewer and Information Scientist. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about the screening of search results for systematic reviews and evidence synthesis, and the methods that we can use and semi-automated tools that are available to help us in screening. So what is screening? The screening is going through the search results and sifting through them to find the relevant results, not only to find them, but also separate them from the irrelevant results, or assigning the relevant and irrelevant results to separate groups. So the screening has got two steps. First is to find, and the second is to assign. The reason that we do screening in systematic reviews is that usually we have to run very broad and sensitive searches. The searches are usually not 100% accurate. Usually about 70, 80, 90% of the search results that we are having are going to be irrelevant, and we need to sift the relevant from irrelevant. And the reason that we are having broad searches, sensitive searches, is to decrease the chance of missing relevant results, but it comes costly, and that cost is having too many irrelevant results. That's why we need to get rid of them. The steps for screening are in two levels. One is entitled abstract, and the second step is for the full text. If I consider that you have done the searches in several databases and you have put your search results into EndNote or any other citation manager, reference manager program, and you have removed the duplicate results that comes across the databases, then you have search results that have been deduplicated. So each one of the records are unique. There is no repetition of that record in your database or library. Then you start screening. At this stage, we call it title and abstract screening, because what we get out of databases usually is bibliographic record that has title, journal name, volume, abstract, and a few other fields per record. So we have to do the screening based on the information that we've got from title and abstract usually. If we screen the title and abstract of each record, we need to assign them either to relevant records or irrelevant records folder or group. Some people have a third category called maybe or undecided. At this stage, I suggested that if you cannot decide about any record, you can easily assign it to relevant records, because then in the next stage you are going to get their full text and then you are going to decide about them. So if you cannot decide about the relevancy of the record by default, you could consider it relevant. Then you go for the full text screening. We are not going to talk about full text screening in this presentation, maybe another presentation. But if you go for the full text screening, at this stage, you can assign your full text to included studies, excluded studies, ongoing studies that are studies that are not finished yet, but they are relevant, and then awaiting assessment studies. These are the studies that you don't have enough information to decide if they should be assigned to the other three categories, which is included, excluded, ongoing. So if you cannot decide, then they stay as awaiting assessment studies. In some of the reviews, when the study is not finished and it is ongoing, or people cannot decide on their eligibility, at the end, they may be excluded. But it is good to keep them separate and monitor them in case the new information comes out or a study gets completed. What is important during this screening is to follow a protocol or proposal that you have written already before looking at the search results. And that is to keep you away from bias. Usually your research question has been defined based on a real world problem, and you are expecting to find the evidence that supports a solution for that problem. If you look at the search results, it is likely that you get biased and you define your research question based on what literature are telling you, not what the problem in real world is. So it is better to have a protocol that is as detailed as possible. You need to specify what are your inclusion and exclusion criteria in that protocol, and you need to be very detailed. You need to say what types of studies you are including. Are there any subtype of the studies that you are going to exclude? What are the population? What is their age, their condition? Do you accept people who have comorbidities? How the condition should be diagnosed? Do you exclude certain studies when the diagnostic tool changes? And what are the outcome measures, how they have been measured, and at what time points? So it is very important to have very detailed, pre-specified, PICO-based or any other framework that you are following protocol for your research question for any systematic review that's time saving in the later stages. For title and abstract screening, if you are using EndNote, you need to set out some of the features. So you can start with making a reference panel visible. And to do that, you need to select the reference panel, which is usually off when you start EndNote, by clicking on Layout, which is located just over the clock if you open EndNote. And then after that, you need to make sure that you have set your output on Annotated. By default, it might be on APA or Vancouver, but if you set it as Annotated, then the abstract will be visible in the reference panel. And then you need to stand on Unfiled, because when you are importing references into EndNote and they have not been assigned to any group, they will stay at Unfiled, which means they have not been filed into any group or any folder. Then you can read and decide if a reference or record is relevant or not, based on which you can assign them to the relevant group or irrelevant group. To create groups in EndNote, you right-click on My Groups and create a group and name them. It is easy to rename them later, so don't worry if something goes wrong with the naming. You can have more than one group, more than two groups, as many as required, depending on the work that you are doing. Some people like to keep the interesting papers that are irrelevant in a separate folder because they think they can use them in background or discussion section of their manuscript. So there is a rule of thumb that if you are going to make yes/no decision on records, just yes/no decision, it may take 8 hours to screen 1000 search results. It is important to know because it helps you to estimate the workload for the screening, which is one of the time-consuming parts of systematic reviews. In some of the disciplines, for example, in social science, the researchers prefer to use a checklist for excluding records during title and abstract screening. Also, the PRISMA 2020 says that you don't have to record the reasons for exclusion of records during title and abstract screening. But in social science, some people do. They are following a checklist. For example, when they are excluding a record, they add a code, for example, 1A, which means that we excluded this record because of their problem with the P element of their PICO population. And then A means that it didn't meet the age criteria that we were following. So they are adding this code. If you go with that one, probably these 8 hours per 1000 search results will not work. So this is based on the fact that many people are just deciding if the record is relevant or not. That is a yes or no question. Then it will take 8 hours for 1,000 search results. If you are experienced person, it's probably your speed is going to be higher. If you are topic expert, you can easily detect the relevancy by looking at the title or the first few lines or just the methods. And there are other tools that can help you. And if you use these tools and methods and techniques, probably your speed is going to increase. For example, you can use the highlighting in Word, capitalizing in text words, Notepad, Word, or EndNote. You can also search for the irrelevant results in EndNote. There is a search function in EndNote through which you can search, for example, mouse or rats in the title. If you are doing a human-based systematic review, you can easily identify and remove them. Also, there are other tools for semi-automation of screening, for example, Rayyan, Covidence, and Eppi Reviewer that are using highlighting to help you to see the terms and the words that you need to decide on relevancy of the records. Can Microsoft Word help? Yes, it can. You can, after the duplication of your results in EndNote, it is possible to select all the references and export them with an output such as Annotate or RIS in RTF format. And the RTF format will be opened by Microsoft Word, and you can use find and replace function in Microsoft Word for your inclusion and exclusion criteria. And if you do so, you can ask Word to highlight or make the relevant words in bold, italic, or underline. Alternatively, you can ask Word to find and replace the same terms with blue color or green color. You can use one color per inclusion criteria. For example, if you are looking for randomized controlled trials of carpal tunnel syndrome, you can use blue for any term relevant to randomized controlled trials and green for anything relevant to carpal tunnel syndrome. And it is possible, I call this a cocktail method. You could mix it up. You can use both bolding, italic, underlining with the color coding. And you can also use the similar colors, for example, red for the exclusion criteria or strike through instead of underline for the exclusion criteria. That creates a Word document that has certain formatting that helps you to detect. And this was the best method before the new semi-automation tools, for example, Rayyan and Covidence and Eppi Reviewer comes to the market and help us. Some people also prefer to, after using this formatting in Word document, to print it out, which is not helpful for the environment. But some people are not good with the screens, or they have conditions that they cannot screen. So if you are using the bold, italic, underline, you can use the black and white or grayscale printing. If you are using a color printer, then you can use color coding. So it is important to remember this in the early stages of formatting, because some people may not have access to color printers or any printer at all. Thank you for your time. I'm gonna go and show you some of these tools so that you get familiar with the environment that they are using. So this is Covidence. It is one of the tools that people in Cochrane are using. You can also get subscription if you are from low and middle income countries, or if you are a student, there's a possibility that you get free access. Otherwise, you need to get a subscription to use this tool. So for the Cochrane reviews, probably it's one of the ideal tools. Many people are interested in using it. After importing the references, you can also add your criteria into this program, inclusion and exclusion criteria. And there is a feature that you can use for highlighting the criteria that you had. You can turn it on and off. It is easier to spot these terms and make a decision of yes, maybe, no. And if you want to do just a title screening, you can hide the abstract. Similarly, this is Rayyan. In Rayyan, you can also import the references, and after that, you can add the terms that you like to be included in Include section, and the terms that are not relevant in Excluded, based on which Rayyan will highlight them in red and green. So case report was one of my excluded terms. Carpal tunnel syndrome is my included term. And then you can make a decision, exclude, maybe include. If you are in full text screening stage, you can also add the reason. Some people prefer to add the reason in title and abstract screening. That is totally dependent on how much time you've got and how many records, because that could be very time consuming in title and abstract screening. It is also possible to use labeling. So if you read a record and you think that it is relevant to certain criteria or certain aspect that is important, you could add them. And that could be helpful because then you will have kind of a scoping or map of the records that you have. It is helpful in narrowing down your research question or your systematic review if you are out of time. And you could easily click on each one of them and see the relevant papers to a certain label. It also provides you with a map and a cloud, a tag cloud that some people find it useful to report in their papers. Exclusion criteria are being recorded, and you can see your progress, that how many you have included. You can also see who has made the decisions. If there are conflicts, you will have another category. So I would say that each one of these programs, Covidence and Rayyan, have their own advantages and disadvantages. The advantage in, let's say, the advantage with the Rayyan is that it is free. The advantage with Covidence is that when you make a decision, it automatically takes the record away, so you don't need to use scrolling or arrow keys to go to the next record. As soon as you make a decision, the record disappears and then the next record comes up. It also can be disadvantage if you make a wrong decision, because then you have to get back and find that record. In Rayyan, the advantage is that you can use the shortcut keys. For example, if you press I when you are on one of the records, it means include, M means maybe, and E means exclude. So you can usually use your keyboard rather than mouse to make the decision. The disadvantage, for example, is that when you are including a term, you need to include all variations. If you are including, for example, if you're interested in having depression as an included term, you need to add depression, depressing, depressive, depressed, each one of them separately, because it doesn't recognize truncation in the current version. One of the things that you need to know, some of these programs like Rayyan and Eppi Reviewer are using machine learning. So after making 50 decisions in Rayyan, you can ask for a rating based on which it rates the records if they are relevant or irrelevant in a 5 or 6 star system. And you can sort them based on that. That will be helpful for the mental and cognitive workload that you have. So it helps your brain to make a decision on irrelevant records that are being listed at the end. You could sort them and the included ones. So it is easier to make decision much faster if you sort them based on relevancy. In Eppi Reviewer, not only that you can use the machine learning, but also you can actually build a specific machine learning model for yourself, or use one of the models that already exist. So these algorithms have been trained already based on certain type of study design, or you can create your own model and train it. It is extremely helpful, in particular if you are dealing with thousands of results, let's say 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 results, because then you can actually train the machine as you go ahead and then screen only 25% or 30%, because after certain level of screening, you realize that there is no new study comes up, which means you've been saturated. So the ratio doesn't change after the ratio of the number of records screened to number of studies included. So there is no new progress. So you can stop screening some of the results or majority of the results. So if you are interested in having and using these programs, there is a website called Systematic Review Toolbox. And you can see the list of the automating and semi-automating programs that exist for each step of systematic reviews. And the name of the program that you heard during these presentations doesn't mean that they necessarily are the best. You need to do your research, you need to look around and use these programs and ask the other information scientists, librarians who are more familiar with these programs and decide which one to use. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. Thank you so much.